Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's character took a real battering yesterday during an explosive day at the COVID inquiry, as evidence was presented from some of his very closest advisers.
So, in a moment, we're going to be asking what exactly we're gaining from the inquiry, which has already cost an estimated £100 million. Wow.
Well, it was pretty grim, but was it worth listening to? Joining us now is Dominique, a political commentator, who thinks it wasn't, and Terry Christian, a journalist and broadcaster, who thinks this is an important hearing. But let's start with you, Dominique. You think this is a complete waste of time and money, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a waste of time. It's just telling us a lot of things that we already know. As someone who was vehemently against lockdowns in the first place, I just think it confirms that never again should people so willingly trust politicians and trust governments that try and convince you to shut down your businesses, shut down your whole life, not allow you to see your loved ones, whilst in private they're partying away. I mean, I remember I was on this show when we were debating whether or not we should even have a Christmas, and I remember explicitly saying, you know, behind closed doors, they're probably not even following the rules anyway, only for us to all find out that they likely weren't. But I have sympathy for those that feel that this inquiry gives them something, because so many people did die and a lot of people are hurt. But again, I just think it's going to be used as a political football. And the lesson that we should learn really is not to knee-jerk towards lockdowns like we did.
I don't want to be...
Well, that's the lesson that you learned.
That I personally
Others might think another lesson. But the point of having an inquiry to look at the evidence, why is that not helpful?
Because, I mean, what is the conclusion that it's going to come to? Yeah, it's going to come to the conclusion that our politicians were incompetent. I think we all know that. And also, it's going to be used as a political football by parties such as Labour, when on the most part they were voting for every single thing that the government did, but were actually saying we should have gone harder and faster, which is obviously something I completely disagree with. So I think it's a waste of money. I think we should be focusing on rebuilding the economy, as because of the actions of this government, our country is crumbling, instead of umming and ahhing of what we should and shouldn't do in hindsight.
Terry, what did you learn, if anything, yesterday that you didn't know?
What did I learn yesterday that I didn't know? Not much, really, but at least you think that the evidence is out there. It will quash your conspiracy theorists, shut them up for good. What it teaches you as well as a country is that you cannot vote for incompetent liars and blaggers. You know,
So you think it informs you about the personalities of people?
It's a really important thing. So many people died, so many people suffered, everybody was touched by it. This could come around again, a deadlier virus. We need to make sure that we have competent people involved to deal with it next time. I mean, this is the biggest crisis that this country has had since World War II.
Were you surprised by what...
Well, no, let me finish.
Yeah, carry on,
we
please
needed
do, yeah.
Mr Churchill, and what we got was, in fact, Mr Blobby. And what's interesting now is it's not people like me or at the opposite spectrum, if you like, of politics attacking Boris Johnson. It's his own people.
I'm not one of Boris. I mean, I'm not one of Boris Johnson's people to begin with, and I don't think again.
Hang on, you've not let me finish.
But this is the point.
You've not let me finish. I'll let you finish.
Well, wrap it up then.
So very briefly, we need to get all of this out in the open. We need to know how to deal with these things in the future, and we need to quash all these ridiculous conspiracy theories that are doing the rounds. Hey, give them my regards next time you're on GB News, by the way, Dominique. And get rid of it.
Theories?
Let's get all the facts out there. It's quite cheap, really, if you think there was over $3 billion just in PPE fraud alone from COVID. A few hundred million for an inquiry is money well spent.
Were either of you surprised by what I would categorise as, if you like, the saloon bar philosophy that we heard being repeated yesterday? All this stuff about that the old must basically take care of themselves and allow the young to get on with their own lives. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to hear down the pub.
I mean, yeah, the way it was worded was absolutely disgusting, and I don't agree with that wording. But, I mean, if you just look at it from an objective point of view without the emotion involved, like any illness, it's going to affect older people first. And I remember explicitly reading a study that did say that the lockdowns and restrictions would only temporarily prevent those that were already vulnerable from dying anyway. And if you look at excess deaths, that tells the story.
You're arguing for the point of view that was prevalent at the time that you know, according to these diaries, Boris Johnson was also considering. That is slightly different, isn't it? Because what you're saying is you've heard something that supports your theory about lockdowns.
Well, no, I mean, the data says, when you look at excess deaths, that those that are dying in excess right now, because excess deaths are rising all around the world, and nobody's really talking about it, the age groups that are most suffering from that are older age groups that were most vulnerable to COVID. So
you agree with the idea?
Well, I agree. I don't agree with the idea that we should just let old people die, because take a look at care homes, for example. In Florida, where lockdowns were not used, they still had better outcomes for elderly people in Florida because they weren't allowed back into care homes so quickly. I'm not saying that we should leave old people to die. I'm saying that, objectively, it's true. And
lots of young people died.
With the conspiracy
Friends
theories,
of mine died.
this is the problem with the idea that anyone that opposes lockdown is a conspiracy theorist.
You're talking about data. I don't believe you've even looked at data.
Because this is why I don't believe the inquiry is useful, and I think it's a farce, because all it's going to do is support people like this who think that, lockdowns were OK, when there are millions of people across this country that have suffered their mental health, their businesses, their livelihoods, their income, the cost of living crisis that we're dealing with right now, vaccine-injured people that nobody wants to talk about.
What mistakes the government made. Are you not worried about the 400 billion that COVID cost us?
Are you not worried about that?
What about getting the 200 million back off, off somebody who did all the PPE fraud?
But what
about the ineptness of the people running the country? Do you trust them to carry on running the country? What happens when the next virus comes around?
Is that what the inquiry is going to do?
Are you going to say, it only killed old people while your mates are dying?
That's not what the inquiry is going to do. Nobody's going to jail. Nobody's going to be kicked out.
Well, that's a shame. I think they should go to jail.
It's a pantomime designed to rile people up and make people more partisan, like with you, when Labour would have been no better.
We want sensible, intelligent people in power and not narcissistic dilettantes who are columnists.
But that does beg the question, doesn't it? What do we expect at the end of the inquiry? I mean, we're going to hear, obviously, a lot more controversial evidence over the next few days. What will the conclusions be, and who has the power to actually draw conclusions from this?
We expect, first of all, we need to have more powers to get rid of the corruption. We need to investigate all the corruption from COVID, how things could have been done a lot better. Now, people talk about Labour vote. If Labour had won that election in 2019, there would have been more money naturally in the NHS and in the care system.
What corruption are you referring to?
Oh, God, the corruption's everywhere. Look at PPE fraud. Look at even the furlough fraud. Rather than pay it directly to people, it was being paid to businesses. You know, so people are getting ripped off. You had youngsters only getting £100 a month when they should have been getting £600 a month.
We've got a lot of comments on this from people at home. Tina agrees with you. What a waste of taxpayer, Dominique, taxpayer money. The world didn't have a clue how to handle a pandemic. It's unfair to make scapegoats of individuals that tried. And then I have to say the majority is we absolutely need this inquiry. We need to not just learn lessons but also hold decision makers to account. It's called accountability.
Yeah, well, what we can't have is people blagging and lying to us anymore for political gain. And kind of...
I actually agree with you, though. I agree with your
and the foamers on side.
I agree with
so no more Boris Johnsons. No more Donald Trump.
I agree with his sentiment, OK?
It's not a sentiment, this is fact.
Well, yeah, I agree with your facts. I'm not sure why you're so aggressive. I agree with his facts that we do need accountability and we shouldn't be letting politicians blag us into making decisions that have been detrimental to the health of so many children locked away with their abusers, so many domestic abuse victims, so many independent business owners, so many people that also deserve a voice as well.
So why don't you want an inquiry then?
Because I'm not saying I don't want an inquiry, but this is a pantomime. What is it going to achieve?
All right, we're going to have to kill it there.
It is. It's
I have to say that Mary...
There'll be another virus.
Mary, via email, speaks for a great many of us. We haven't touched on this. She's disgusted by the language that was being used by the government at the time of the pandemic. She says her husband of 44 years was 69 and died on March 31st, 2020. She said, I miss him every day, and his life needs to be held to account, and we need to face up to the people who've lost.
Well, it's like the Hillsborough inquiry. You know,
that's a good analogy,
the people who suffered because of the pandemic deserve this inquiry. Doesn't matter what it costs.
Well, I just hope there will be some sort of actual outcome rather than it just being used as a political football.
Well, it's not going to be...
Which, sadly, I think...
A virus doesn't care if you're right or left. or work on GB News. It's going to target
Why do you keep mentioning GB News? Number
'cause
one,
it's
what
poison.
does that have to do with this conversation?
But it doesn't really.
Okay.
So
You're an example of what I'm talking
Take
about.
it outside, is what I'm going to say, and have your own inquiry. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to both of you.
Cheers.
And thank you for all your views at home as well.